Hey everyone, I'm here with Tom Stone today with Flat Branch Home Loans. We're here to talk about closing costs, and he's here to help talk about how he can help you budget for it and prepare for those closings. So, the first big question that a lot of clients typically have is how do you help them estimate their cash to close early in the process?
So on average, closing costs and prepaids are going to cost around $6,500 to $7,500. They can go up based on certain other programs. Like if we do an MHDC loan, those costs tend to run a little bit higher, about $1,500 more than average. So that's kind of where I start on the phone with them. But then once I get the application or learn their information, I try to zone in on it. The wild card right now is really homeowners insurance. It's like throwing a dart. And so that one's a really hard piece to judge on the closing costs right now.
So, closing costs can vary depending on the type of loan. How exactly does that play out?
So surprisingly, closing costs don't vary that much among loan types. They're very similar. There are certain things that are charged with an FHA loan, a VA loan, a USDA loan, a conventional loan. But overall, the actual cost for closing doesn't change that much. We do see some change if we get into like an MHDC loan. There's reasons for that because the program has much higher risk for lenders, so they can charge a little bit more in fees um, in how they go about their business. But for the most part, closing costs actually don't vary a whole lot between loan type.
So, another big question that I get from my clients sometimes is what's the difference between prepaid costs and actual closing costs?
So closing costs and prepaids are two separate items. Closing costs are the cost of doing the business of the loan, appraisal, credit report, title fees, origination charge. That's all part of closing. Prepaids are the items that you're paying up front. So that's going to be taxes, insurance, and then odd days interest. So from the day you close to the first day of the next month. Those are what constitute prepaids. They're pretty much lumped into one cost. I like to talk to people about their cash to close. Some lenders out there are a little tricky and they'll say, oh, well, closing costs are only going to be this, which is true. But most people live in this world that I like to call reality, and they want to know what's my total cost. They don't care that it's closing costs and prepaids. They want to know what is my total cost.
I like people who stick with reality as well, but to help them out, what are some creative ways to reduce their out of pocket closing costs?
So, to reduce closing costs, there's not a whole lot you can do to reduce the actual closing costs. Um, the closing costs are pretty set by almost every lender. Appraisals are going to be a certain price, credit reports are going to be a certain price. So, there are things available to help people reduce their costs. So we have a grant for first-time home buyers called Flex Funds, and you can get up to 2% of your purchase price or $4,000, lesser of the two. So that's one way to help offset those costs. There's grants like MHDC. There's other ways we can do that. The only thing that the buyer really can control is going to be in cost of insurance. They can't really control the taxes because the house they pick, those taxes are going to be set. So there's not a lot we can do. Now, sometimes we get appraisal waivers. If you put a certain amount down, Fannie and Freddie are letting you go up to 10% down and maybe get an appraisal waiver if the property meets certain criteria, and we get that through the automated system, which would reduce an appraisal cost. So there are a few things that we can do, but there's not a whole lot in and of itself to actually reduce the cost.
For those who don't know, what is Fannie and Freddie?
So Fannie and Freddie are the conventional loan companies that buy all the loans and aggregate them and provide all the money. So they set up the big rules. There's also FHA, which is a federal housing authority, which is a government loan. VA, the Veterans Administration, which is another government loan. USDA or rural development, that's another loan type. So they're the basic four loan types that we have.
So, based off your professional opinion, what would you say is the biggest misconception that people have about closing costs?
So that can be a big rabbit hole because there's lots of things out there on the internet that people see as far as the cost and what it's going to take to do the loan. And they might look at an online lender and see that the rate is really low and the costs are really low, but they don't pay attention to the fact that that's for the perfect borrower. Perfect. Best loan amount, best credit, best everything, best down payment. So The best way to handle closing costs is if you have a certain pot of money, maybe we can just use that for the down payment, and then the agent can help negotiate closing costs into the contract. Each loan program has a different amount that can be used. Typically, in conventional, it's up to 3% of the purchase price. On the government loans, it's generally 6%. So those are the numbers that we can use to help you get into a house. Oftentimes, though, you probably know from experience that that might mean we raise the price of the house just a little bit to leverage the amount that
Yeah.
we use. So, but it can be done, and there's other ways that we can help you as well. So we can maybe raise your rate and do what's called premium pricing and give you a big lender credit to cover closing costs. I've done that in the past. So I wouldn't let closing costs and prepaids be something that hinders you from wanting to buy a house.
Again, Tom, thank you so much for coming. It's been super helpful joining us today. And again, I'm sure all the people out there would be helpful for any misconceptions you might have cleared up and anything else they might need.